government has been accused of dragging its feet in prosecuting apartheid-era crimes handed over by the TRC. Preliminary hearings for the murders of the COSAS 4 will get underway in the High Court in Johannesburg this morning. This criminal case expected to begin in October this year, almost 40 years since the students were murdered. That was in 1982. Human rights lawyer and former TRC Commissioner Yasmin Sooka joins us for more on this story. Yasmin, it's great to have you with us on the show this morning, not least because it was just earlier this month that you gave that lecture at UCT on why apartheid-era crimes are yet to be prosecuted. I want to get to the specifics of the COSAS 4 in a minute, but let's talk about the work of the TRC and what was meant to be this transitional compact with apartheid-era victims as we went into 1994. Has that compact translated into some of the things that we hoped would happen?
Thank you, Michelle, and good morning to your listeners. I think that the Transitional Compact involved really a sacrifice on the part of victims, and that is that they would give up their rights to investigations and prosecutions of those who were responsible for the murders of their loved ones. And this was done on the basis that the amnesty would, provide them with disclosure, the truth about what happened, and in return for which, if people did not apply or they were refused amnesty, then the law would take its course. And so at the end of 1998, the TRC handed over these lists of cases which had, in fact, to be investigated and prosecuted. And of course, in the period since then, we have had a long struggle with both the state and the prosecution to get these cases off the ground. And in a sense, what most victims and their families say is that they feel utterly betrayed because this was a very difficult compromise. Remember, together with ZAPO, a number of prominent families also took the amnesty legislation to the Constitutional Court. And the Constitutional Court, of course, upheld the legitimacy of the amnesty law, but only on the basis that the rule of law would be fulfilled once it was very clear whether or not people were refused or denied amnesty. And it also did so on the basis that there would be full truth recovery for the families. So it's really a bitter pill to swallow that so many years down the line there has been no action. And I think from the cases that have come before the courts, we now know that there was political interference by the executive at the highest level, and that in fact the NPA and the Hawks were complicit in the political suppression of these cases. In fact, the recent Supreme Court of Appeals judgment in the Ahmed Timol case confirmed that. And so this has really been a challenge for many of the families of victims, including the families of the COSAS 4.
Absolutely. In fact, over 300 cases handed over to the NPA for prosecution by the TRC. Perhaps a good place to start is, to list how many cases have gone that far.
Well, the only cases that in fact have gone forward have been, I would say, around 5. And that is because of the initiative of the family. So you've had an indictment of the death squad in the Nokutula Simelane case. Nokutula Simelane, of course, was the victim of an enforced disappearance by the Soweto death squad, but that trial has yet to come to fruition. Then we've had the successful reopening of the inquest into the Ahmed Timol matter, but as you know, he's, the perpetrator there, Jean Rodrigues, has now taken his indictment on appeal to the Constitutional Court. We've also had the successful reopening of the Neil Agate inquest, and there we're awaiting the ruling of the inquest judge. And last week, in fact, we saw the reopening of the inquest into the death of Dr. Hafeje, and that is continuing as we speak with the medico-legal expert, in fact, continuing his expert evidence today. And of course, this case, the COSAS 4, sees Ephraim Mafalapitsa in fact, appear before the High Court today, but in very controversial circumstances, actually.
Tell us about those controversial circumstances, especially as they relate to the security branch officers responsible for the murders of these 4 students.
Well, the COSAS 4 case involves, of course, the deliberate booby-trapping of hand grenades, which were then used to trap 4 COSAS students, in a pump room that was really, with the whole operation having been set up by the security branch. And it involves actually, 5 security branch officers, including Ephraim Mafalapitsa, the Askari, who in fact is going to appear in court today. The COSAS 4 students, one of them, Zandisile Musi, had approached Ephraim on the basis that, his older brothers had gone into exile with Ephraim. And so he approached him because he told them that, he wanted to leave the country with his colleagues. He wanted to go and receive military training and then eventually join the ANC. And Mafalapitsa reports this back to his superiors at Vlakplaas, and these involve people like Willem Skoon, Jan Kutsia, Abraham Krobela, and Christian Rorik. And they, in fact, encourage him to lure them into, a plot where they intend to actually kill them. And German Masela, who's the other famous Askari implicated, pretends he's a taxi driver. And together with Mafalapitsa, they pick these young men up and they take them to this pump house in Kalafong, and they basically show them these hand grenades. But then they lock them up in this room and they detonate the hand grenades. And 3 of the young men are killed and one of them is severely injured. But one of the challenges with this case is that the amnesty application, all 5 were refused amnesty in 1999 already. And this was a very clear-cut case about those who were implicated in the murder. And so it was a really easy case for the NPA to actually pick up and, in fact, indict the killers. But shockingly, when Mafalapitsa appeared a week ago, he was the only one that was being indicted. And the challenge, of course, is that he's also an Askari. He himself left the country in 1981. He returned in 1982. He joins Vlakplaas, and he's, in fact, an Askari. And as you know, Askaris were people who joined the liberation movements, but they were then pressured into becoming informers really for the state. And in that context, Mafalapitsa doesn't really receive the protection of the state in the same way that his, co-conspirators, Skoon, Kutsia, Grobela, and Rorik, are being supported and funded by the state. And so one of the things we have raised is that while it's really useful to see the state finally move on this case, we don't just want to see the foot soldiers. We want to see the indictment of the remaining 4 who were responsible for the planning, the authorization, and of course ensuring that Mafalapitsa was able to carry out this operation together with Joe Mamasela. And, this raises, I think, some of the complexities of the conflict during the apartheid years, that you can't see them in, a binary kind of relationship where you have, the one group acting and the other group acting against, because the whole notion of an Askari is quite a complex issue, because it involves the fact that people themselves were forced then to become informers for the state for one or other reason. Now, some of them obviously do this for money. Others, of course, may do it for political motivations. One doesn't know. But the complexity of it involves the betrayal, really, of their comrades. And that's one of the challenges that we're going to face in this particular case.
Yasmin, so Mfalapitso is the only one appearing in this case today. Are you saying that that means
Yes.
the other security branch officers, as we speak, are walking free and have been walking free?
Well, at this moment they are. And you know, what's extraordinary here is that, of course, Mafala Pizza made a confession. And that confession is, of course, what implicates him in this case. And at one point, the state wanted to use him as a witness against the others, but then at some point he changed his mind. And one of the problems, of course, is that he's also represented by the same lawyers who are representing the other four. Mm-hmm. And in our view, that represents a massive conflict of interest, because you can see that he could possibly be used to shield the other perpetrators from justice. And these are some of the issues that we are engaging with the NPA on behalf of the families, who last year, you know, we supported them to apply for the exhumation of the bodies of their loved ones.
Yasmin Sooka, thank you so much for your time this morning. That's all the time we have for this discussion, an incredibly important one at that. Yasmin Sooka is with the Foundation for Human Rights. She's the executive director there, and such an incredibly important story. The TRC recommending or handing over 300 cases to the NPA for prosecution. That was in 1988. The very few that have actually gone to the stage of prosecution have only gotten there through the hard work of families of the loved ones that were lost during the apartheid years. Yasmin Sooka, thanks very much for your time on the AM Report.